Good evening, everyone. We will start in 3 minutes. Good evening once again. I think it's safe to say that we can begin. It's 17:05. So we are continuing from last week's session, and we are looking at 3.7, which is, and I think I've made my opinion known about writing a literature review. That is one chapter that is such a tedious task, and having to take my students through this section is also a tedious task. So, what we are looking at in 3.7 is how do you actually get or guide your students, your postgraduate students. Firstly, we mentioned a lot about reading, dissecting the information. Now we need to put it into some kind of organization and written word. Okay, starting to write down those thoughts, everything that you have dissected. Okay, so how would you, those of you that are supervising, how do you actually guide your students? We mentioned about the reading, but unpacking all that information that they've read now to start structuring their literature review. Anyone? And I'm going to give you my experiences as well. How do you guide them specifically on the structure? Because it's not easy. You don't know what to put in a literature review. You don't know how to break down your headings, your subheadings, and so on. How do you actually guide your students on writing and organizing the literature review so that it has a good flow and it is written in a very scientific, technical manner? Anyone? No one. Okay. So the first thing that I learned as a supervisor, um, well, not the first thing I learned as a supervisor. One of the things I learned after I was supervising, I started supervised my first student. I learned a lot. Devashri?
Um, Hi, Prof. So in the social sciences, what I do is I actually say to my students to write me an outline after they've read. So they've read, they've summed up a lot of the readings that they've done, but now I tell them to do an outline for me. And in that outline, to look at the global context, narrow it down into the local context or South African literature,
Yeah.
and further below that. I also ask them to reflect on each area, and give their critical feedback and look for gaps. So that's what I do. Thanks, Prof.
Thank you so much for that. But how do your students know? Do we guide them on how to, and this is for everyone, what goes into the literature review in terms of headings, subheadings, how to organize the information, how to have a proper structure, a proper flow into the writing of a literature? Because you can dissect the information, you can put it down onto paper. I find that a lot of students, like I said, these are just personal experiences, um, and I've learned from it over the years that students don't know. They collected this information and it's now starting to put it down, writing it. Okay. Um, Actually, that's one way of actually doing it. Another way is if we look at, and I went for a an actual literature review course that UJ had, and now the Scopus AI basically does everything for you. But and I also went for that training. So what we learned there, and I found it quite useful, is that um, I haven't been personally, I have not been guiding my students in terms of when you are writing a literature review, in order to organize your headings and subheadings and what goes into that actual chapter, you have to look at your objectives and research questions and pick out the key words from each objective, each research question, and then you do your reading on each of those keywords relating to your topic as well. And then you align that literature to your objectives. And that actually worked well with some students because a lot of students wait for templates. They wait for a template, they wait for a formal structure. Now chapter 2, you can't really give them a form. Introduction, yes, we all know introduction, problem statement, objective, significance, etc. Right? You can give them a proper template to follow, a rubric to follow. Chapter 3, same thing. You can give them a structure, but the chapter 2 and 4 is very important in that it will be structured similarly because they are linked. And the chapter 2, we can't give them the headings, but we can guide them on where to get the headings from. And a lot of it is from the objectives and the research questions. Devashi, I like the fact that you said global, local, because I use what is called a funnel, which is an upside down pyramid. And the global context is obviously the broad opening of that funnel. And then you narrow down to an African context and then South African context right at the bottom. Okay, think of an inverted triangle or pyramid. So that's a funnel effect that I actually look at. when helping them to structure. So one is get those keywords so it helps you develop headings and subheadings. Also looking at the global to local context. Unpacking certain themes that you pick up, common themes, trends, patterns, etc. And then obviously, whatever claim you are making, you are going to support it with what another author had said. So, some of the ways also you can do this is grouping the articles and or chapters by concepts and unpacking those concepts, like you said, Devashri, putting it down on paper. The Scopus AI also, if you put in keywords, then it actually gives you articles that are relevant to your particular topic and structure. Okay. Two is organizing the literature chronologically. And I found that students don't do this because they're not guided properly. And again, I learned this from experience because I also didn't guide students on that because I was learning about this chronological order. So when you are writing a literature review, or when you're supervising your students on how to write the literature review, always put it in chronological order. So when they are stating a claim and they're supporting it with references, the references must be in chronological order because you can't put 2021 after 2025 because in 2021 it was said first and then 2025 said it afterwards, supported it afterwards, right? So chronological order is very important. Organizing the literature contextually by writing in certain areas or in Western Europe or in developing countries, and it's your style of contextualizing it to a specific location or scope or industry and so on. Okay. Organizing the literature thematically, like we said, grouping concepts, looking at common trends and patterns that come up. The global to local, which is also looking at, like we said, global scale being very broad, narrowing it down Africa or to a specific continent, and then narrowing it down to the country that the research is being done. In our case, global African, South African. All right. Unpacking the concepts so that you put your themes systematically, then claiming your an evidence where you are staking a claim. That is your voice in the literature, your voice in the research, and then you support it by evidence. Evidence meaning that you are supporting it by what others have said in the field or what other researchers have done that's similar to your study. All right. Um, Pose a problem, work out a solution. This stems from the problem statement. That is why I also said unpack it by looking at your objectives and your research questions. A lot of key words for your headings and subheadings come from your problem statement, your objectives, and your research questions. It took me a long time to actually um, guide my students that this is, I'm not saying it's cast in stone, but it actually really helped. Okay. And then you base it on arguments and counter arguments and debate. So when you are writing research, we generally tend to write argumentatively. Argumentatively, where you know you want to say something, but you need to back it up, so you're debating it, and then you can also play one author against another author because author one and author two are concurring and saying the same thing, and both those authors agree with what you are saying. Argumentative would be maybe they're not saying the same thing, almost as close, but you can use it as a recommendation. This is what can be done, because then you can find the gaps in literature in that these authors are lacking in their research, and your current research, is going to fill that gap if what is missing in the previous research that has been done. Everyone with me? So, as a reader, as a writer, we need to know what is expected of the student and to guide them on how to write that literature review. Like I said, it took me a long time. Total 20 years as an academic, and I'm still learning a lot about research, how to compile research. There's new methods, there's new techniques, there's better techniques that I didn't know that existed, and I'm learning about them now. All right. Then the next thing that we are looking at is it's critical or crucial when you're writing a literature review or any chapter, and you obviously have to provide evidence, you have to reference, and you have to cite. And here's the big thing for any institution is about the plagiarism policies and practices. At what stage do we guide our students or take them through ethics and plagiarism? So it's not just plagiarism, we have to look at ethics as well. And you guys did a module on research ethics. And we have to look at the study that we are undertaking. How does it affect the participants' rights when you're collecting information? But most importantly, before we get to that, is the plagiarism. Okay. And how do we unpack this with the students? Come on, guys. You talk to me, you tell me. Or how does your faculty, department, or institution unpack that plagiarism with the postgraduate students, even the undergraduate students? I'm not going to give you a lot of examples of mine, but yeah, I have examples, but I want to hear from you because you need to use these examples and practices for your assessments that you are doing. Okay? Anyone? Devashri?
Thanks, Prof. So plagiarism is no doubt a very precarious issue now with the advent of AI.
Yes.
Um, so I ask students to turn their literature reviews in. Our system has an AI detection um, on feature on Moodle as well,
Yes.
so they can also see if they are doing that. I give them three opportunities so that they could make the revisions to change if it's very high, the score's very high. But I also ask them, in line with the AI policy that we are developing at our institution, is to actually do an AI declaration. And
Yes.
this is not just a simple statement in which they say they have or have not used AI, but more specifically to kind of show how they have used AI. So, in a table to acknowledge what AI they've used and how they've
Yes.
used it, because I am of the strong belief that we cannot escape AI and we need to learn to work with it. So I think those kinds of practices of getting students to acknowledge how they've used it, where they've used it, actually speaks to the ethical principles, but also grounds them into doing things differently. So, and it safeguards the student, safeguards me. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Prof.
Thank you so much. And I think we have almost, well, I would say the same practice in that yeah, we have that declaration. It's the declaration is actually part of the cover page, so it doesn't just state that generative AI was used. They have to tell us firstly how much of it was used, what was used. So basically just tell us a package, because the Turnitin on Moodle does show the percentage, but our university stands that there's no specific policy, and there's no policy being developed for us until such time that we can actually fathom what's really happening with AI. And we teach our students, we go through this entire ethics and plagiarism training with all students registered at UJ. Every department does it, every faculty does it, and we take them through, and then we even say we've played around with it, the Turnitin, even though it gives you an AI percentage, we don't know how true that percentage is because we have tested it out. AI told us about this article that was fabricated, but when you look at the actual article, it's a proper journal article, peer reviewed journal article that's on Scopus and Google Scholar. So what they're picking up may not be a true reflection. I don't think the systems are in place yet to show us a true reflection of it. But yes, if the student declares it, and we have also declaration of plagiarism, and plagiarism, it's part of their cover sheet when they're submitting any assessment, even if they're submitting their master's dissertation and their PhD theses and so on. This is what is there, and the percentage that has been used, as well as, even if they don't do the percentage, but like you said, a table of how it was used. Yeah, so I think they must be honest enough, because we've had students who have said, so we pick it up also, some of it is true, some of it not true, student uses it, and then there's also this paraphrasing tool which I played around with, right? I don't like it because it kind of changes the whole context of that sentence, because there's only so many ways you can write something or write a sentence. And um, I've noticed students, and the language, and then when you have the students presenting, that's why we do oral presentations, right? Because when you have a student presenting, then you can see from that understanding and what is written on paper and what the student is presenting, the language is completely different, you know. So you can see that it's very technical writing. Also, those what is it, paraphrasing tools, the quote bot, etc. Um, and not very helpful in that it changes the context. Some instances it does paraphrase where it doesn't pick up a very high similarity percentage. You can get away with that. But again, that also needs to be, the paraphrasing tools also need to be declared. Devashti?
Um, Prof, the thing is that, there is a certain level of intelligence in which you need to engage with AI. You need to learn how to ask the prompts to get it to do what you need to do.
Yes.
You need to learn how to um, understand and critically engage with the information that's given to you. And I think students sometimes are under this false impression that if you just say, write me a literature review on inequality in South Africa, gender, whatever, that it's
Yeah.
just going to spew out a couple of pages for you and you're going to
Yes.
be also um, you know, happy that you've now got a literature review to work with. And
Yes.
the English is so profound and beautiful that it
Yes.
makes it seems like, it's well done. But I found that the only way you can overcome uh, those challenges that students face, and especially doing this ethically, is if you demonstrate to them how to work with AI. And sometimes showing them how to work with it the wrong way and how to work with it the right way is a stepping stone towards getting them to change their behavior in the way they use AI. um, and so, in my undergraduate classes, I really show them and take to do that. In my postgraduate, I say go ahead and use AI, but remember, this stuff can be very it can give you very false information. You need to go back and check what if those references actually exist.
Yes.
If those readings actually, there's lots of hallucinations, that's the word I'm looking
Yeah.
for. So AI hallucinates quite a bit, and unless you really engage with the output and make it your own, and it doesn't mean, I mean, it can help you overcome your writing block, it can give you some sort of structure, but that is not the end game. The end game is for you to engage with it further and
Yes.
make it your own. And I think that's where students need guidance, because they don't know how to work with AI.
Yes.
So the first step is every teacher, every lecturer, every academic has to fully engage with it first to learn the the bad practices,
Yes.
and then be able to develop ways in which to show these students or teach them how to use it more productively. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. Because I mean, in this day and age, it's not just a copy and paste thing, right? And that's what students are doing. They, like you said, they're not prompting it in a way where they can get proper information, and that they just want to take what's given to them, from these apps and just put it into a report. And like you said, when you're reading it, you can see how it's written. And that is why we've now started doing the oral presentations with all students, even the defense of their proposal, defense of their progress report, defense of their final report. And it's helped because that's when you can teach the students as much as you can. We've tried to do that. Like I said, we've taught them, and this is the catchphrase here at UJ: use it ethically and responsibly, right? Students tend to abuse the whole AI thing, and like I said, it's made it so much easier. Even publications as well, people have been producing so much of papers in a short period of time, and you wonder now the AI that's involved in actually producing these papers. I also agree with it being, it gives you fabricated information. Reason being is, like you said, we need to learn as academics what's the good and bad things, the bad ways of using AI. So I decided I wanted to write. It wasn't really like a portfolio. It was like more like a reference letter, right? On for me. So I prompted it in such a way, and it was a reference letter for me. So I used as a third person asking for reference letter for myself, right? And it came up with stuff that I never published, journals I never published in, things I've never even like what do you call it, professional bodies and stuff like that. It brought up so many things that were fabricated, which I don't even belong to, things that don't even exist. So yeah, it's very tricky. It's very tricky, and it can confuse you. And if students do not look at the work that is being produced, you're going to end up with, like I said, fabricated references, fabricated stories, things that don't even exist, and it becomes one big mess. And we actually sit with disciplinary hearings because of that, because it becomes a transgression. So part of 3.8 is, how do we assist the students, discussing plagiarism with them step by step, and then also how to avoid it. So we take them through an entire process, like you said, do's and don'ts of plagiarism. Karen?
A question that I've been kind of toying with. What is the obligation on the supervisor now with the risks of AI, etc., in terms of checking the references and making sure that all of them actually exist?
Say that again, Karen. Your sound is very distant.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Oh, much better.
My apologies. My mic was up on my head. My apologies. What is the obligation of the research supervisor, given given AI, given that we know that it creates false references, that it creates information that's incorrect? Is there a responsibility on the supervisor to actually go in and check every reference and trying to validate what the student has included in their literature and in any of the work that they're producing?
And thank you so much for that. And I think it goes back to what Devashri has said, in that the student is doing the work, the student needs to verify. It's like how I had to go back. It said that it was fabricated, but it actually was not. It was a proper peer
Mm,
reviewed journal that I used, right? And it was for my own work, mind you.
mm,
So, but you do actually get fabricated ones, things that don't exist. And the student needs to do a cross reference and verify that everything is a peer reviewed journal. We actually have an admin, a postgraduate coordinator, who does the verification. Who every because we don't get a lot of masters like every month, or so every month they look at it, and if you got about two or three masters graduating or submitting the full document, they will verify. And then they'll contact the student. They will tell the student, this is the percentage that we found on Turnitin. This is the percentage we found on the AI, you know, which is part of Turnitin. And this is the cross references that we looked at. This does not exist, this does not exist, this is fabricated. So we actually have someone that specifically does that. We had to employ someone. Us doing it, like for myself, I've got 43 masters and
mm.
PhD students. It's too much to have to for me to go and verify and cross reference, but
Mm,
there's ways of doing it. First the student must take that responsibility, and
mm.
then we took additional responsibility by hiring someone as an admin assistant to actually cross reference and do that. That is what that person's sole job is.
Okay.
Devashri, do you want to
Thank you.
add to that, or
Yeah.
Karen, have you been answered?
Yeah. So Karen, I think and I'm working on my PhD now,
Mm,
but also with supervising the students. I think if the supervisor goes to the reference list
yeah.
and looks at those references, you would see that AI is not perfect in terms of the referencing.
Uh,
And I'm talking here specifically in terms of the referencing styles.
mm,
Sometimes they leave, it leaves out a lot of information, especially if it's just pulling stuff out from the net. Then it's leaving out your publisher the place of publication, or it's not using the proper text formatting that we use, in terms of the different styles
The
mm,
in which
reference
we
style,
reference.
yes.
So it's easy to pick up if a
yeah.
student is just using AI to generate stuff without the proper sources. Also, if stuff is drawn from the internet, then you need the proper, um, I think it's ODI, or hyperlinks, for your,
DOI.
yeah, sorry. So you need to, look for things like that and ask them to include things like that. And
Mm,
it
Yeah.
kind of deters them from just drawing things from the internet and putting it in there. And once you can show the student that you actually are able to see the red flags, again, it just it changes or deters their behavior from doing unethical things and being
yeah.
more, what's the word? I think being more conscious
Yeah.
of their work and what they're doing and how they're even using AI.
Yeah, I think that's very useful. I mean, my worry is that without and obviously what Prof said, you can't go through and check every reference. You can kind of have a view and try and let them know that you are alive to it. But I think if it gets through to the point that an examiner or somebody else picks it up, it's such a poor reflection on the
Yes.
supervisor as well. If you've allowed something like that that's been AI, entirely AI generated to get through. So it really it worries me that without going into an extra layer of checking it myself, it could backfire on not only on the student but me too.
But you as a supervisor,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
So, I'm on the AI committee, so that's why I'm
Uh,
a bit vocal about these things, right? Because we've been playing a lot with it, but also I'm a part of um, a group with MIT, in which we kind of working to kind of overcome some of these problems. So the thing is, Karen, I think a big part of it is you're going to have to be more attentive to AI and
yeah.
its developments.
Yeah.
I think if you say to AI, generate me an honors research report, 21 pages, this is the topic. I don't think you're going to be able to get an output that is going to be the way we expected students to have done it before.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at stuff, it'll be very easy to pick up even in the proposal stage and then deter their behavior, because AI can only work with small amounts of information
Yeah.
at a time. So, if you're
Uh,
saying to write 21 pages for you or write 30 pages for you, it's going to give you a lot of garbage, a
mm,
lot of repetition, and it's easy to pick up even if you just skim reading through. Um, so, there are steps that you can do to actually stop these practices very early on. If they're using it in small amounts, they're applying it because, again, you can't stop them from using it.
mm,
Yeah.
There's laws and policies which, even if the student is accused of AI, we can't really prove it
mm,
legally.
yeah.
Legally,
So
yes.
the only thing that we can do is deter the behavior and get students to actually do the work. and therefore the onus of the responsibility shifts on us. So when you're seeing something and you're seeing it initially, then you just have those uncomfortable conversations with the students, and you will see things will change a little bit. But that's what's been happening in my world. But it's not like it can just generate a thesis for you and it's ready for public
Yeah. Yeah.
examination.
Exams. Yeah.
That I think is just a
Yeah.
fallacy.
No, but you're right.
Um,
It does do it in smaller portions.
yes,
To
so you
write
can
Yeah.
a,
say
yeah,
5 pages, 10 pages, three
yeah,
pages. You'll
Yeah.
get relevant output.
yeah.
But other than that,
Yeah. It's
I don't think
difficult.
it's going to be an entire document.
Yeah. My
Or
Thank you
biggest
so
flag
much for that.
yeah, the biggest flag for me is the spelling at the moment. If it's got
Okay.
American spelling in it, that's how I spot it. But other than that, I suppose I must just really be alert to it.
We have to. We have to
Yeah.
be very alert in what the students are doing because they try to find these loopholes, right? But it's
Mm,
our responsibility, obviously, to guide them
mm.
on it. Um,
Thank you.
and
it's
just one more thing I wanted to
yes,
add, Prof, is that when we think of decolonialization, when we think of the academic project, we must understand that because students' first language is not English,
yes,
they do have a problem in terms of expressing themselves in English.
yes,
And even in my honors classes, in terms of them articulating the thought in their head in English, it's a difficult thing for them to
Mm,
do. And I encourage them to say, okay, write your piece, use Grammarly,
mm,
one, but two, also you can then take that piece that you've put into that you've written, that you have worked on, and put it into an AI um, platform or whatever, and ask it to write this for you to be more clear or more meaningful, and then re-look at it to see if it actually makes sense for you. So in other words, what I'm saying is we need to learn to work with AI to overcome some of those
yes,
challenges that we face with students and their language
most
problems.
definitely.
And that also builds confidence in the student. They're also learning by practice of using language. So that is actually helpful. So we can't completely, be negative in our view of AI, but we need
Yes,
to also think of how we need to use AI to be more productive, to overcoming barriers that we face within our context. Thanks.
most definitely. Thank you so much for that. And with that being said, we are on your assessment three, which is your assignment three on page 52. So, I did speak to the coordinator, and what I'm going to do is I'm opening up. So on your Moodle for this module, you will see it's on your left-hand side, it says assessments. When you click on the assessments, it takes you to each individual assignment. So each individual assignment, you have a open date and you have a submission date and you have a post-submission date, all ending just before you give me your final submission. Okay, so you're open from now until that final submission date, which is I think the 18th of September. So by that time, you must have finished all assignments. Okay. Um, so the portal is actually open right now. I've put up assessment one and two for you to upload. And now this week I will do three, four, and five. So unpacking each assignment, I discuss with you what needs to be done. And then we move on to the next unit. So assignment three is in two parts where you are dissecting activity 3.1 and activity 3.2. So let's look at activity 3.1 and activity 3.2. So activity 3.1 is on page 39 if you are following in your content guide. If not, then follow on the screen. Go up to 3.1, right? Write a paragraph in which you reflect on the roles you expect your postgraduate students to perform. You might want to use the questions below to stimulate your thinking. So remember, a lot of this is reflective writing because it's reflecting on your own practices, what you are currently doing, or what you want to do as a supervisor in the future. Okay, so the first part of assignment 1 is unpacking your activity 3.1. Sorry, assignment 3, 3.1. What do you require postgraduate research students to do when they are performing the role of text participants? This is writing. In the role of the text user relevant to the reading required of the postgraduate research student in your discipline. Is the role of a text user relevant to reading? Because obviously you have to read a text before you can write in your voice, supported by evidence or references. What do you require postgraduate research students in your discipline to do when they are performing the role of a text analyst, analyzing the text that they have read? Which role or roles of a reader of multimodal texts, if any, are postgraduate research students in your discipline likely to find challenging, and why? And when we unpack the section of multimodal ways of reading, writing, etc., how we absorb information, absorb knowledge, um, what do you think your students would find challenging? And one of the things that was prominent in our discussions was reading and writing in English because of it not being their first language. So that can be your start. So the question for activity 3.1, write a short paragraph, 80 to 100 words, in response to any of the 4 questions, any of these 4 questions, but 3 out of them, 3 out of 4, based on the roles of the reader of text or print and of multimodal text. For example, a total of 3 paragraphs, sorry, a total of 3 paragraphs, one in response to each question. Okay, and that is for a total of 9 marks. So, a small paragraph, 80 to 100 words. So, you're writing in response to each question, and you're going to choose 3 out of the 4 questions and write on your reflection of each of those questions and what you've learnt. Okay, each paragraph should indicate understanding of the aspect of the role of the reader in your response. Okay, um, thumbs up, thumbs down. Everyone know what to do in part 1?
Prof,
Yes,
just for clarity, so we choose any 3 of the 4
4
in
questions.
activity 3.1 and
Yes.
write a paragraph on each.
A response, yes.
So
So you'll have a total of 3 paragraphs,
yeah, okay,
one response to each question.
thank you.
Okay, it's on page 52. It's broken down there. All right, so moving on to the second part of the assessment. The second part of the assessment takes you to activity 3.2. And what are we unpacking in activity 3.2? Choose a short journal article or book chapter from your discipline, or an extract from a longer article or a chapter. Okay, so it can either be short or long, right? And that you would advise one of your postgraduate students to read. Write a paragraph in which you identify one feature of complex text as outlined above. Explain why your postgraduate research students might find it difficult, and reflect on what you could do to assist them to address this difficulty. So I remember in this session when we started, Devashri mentioned she gives her students a text. Was it a text or part of a text that you ask your students to read and then write on it, if I'm not mistaken? So that's basically what you're doing. So if you had to take this short journal or book chapter and you had to tell your students, read it and then write a paragraph in which you identify a feature of that text, right? Explain how your students might find it difficult and reflect on what you could do to assist them if there are any difficulties. Firstly, again, language, right? The language barrier, the tone in which they write, the style in which they write. Sorry, does somebody have their hand up? Does someone want to say something?
Sorry, it was me. I think I was not muted. Sorry about
Okay,
that, Prof.
no problem. All right.
Okay.
I'm on a different screen, so I don't even know if the hands are up or anything. All right. Um, all right. So that is activity 3.2. So the question for the assignment on activity 3.2, you do not need to include the article. So I don't want to know what article it is, okay, because it's within your discipline. You don't have to include the article or the book chapter that you are choosing. This part of the task is to firstly describe what students are likely to find difficult about the article and chapter, and then to outline what you could do to assist them to address this difficulty. So maybe you gave them a text, or it may have been outside of their discipline. Maybe it's within the discipline, it's hard to read, it's hard to grasp. But what did they find difficult about it? What could they find difficult about it? And how did you, as a supervisor, address these difficulties? And that gives you a total of 6 marks. Both the difficulty and the strategy used to assist the student needs to be clearly described, and the strategy needs to be a plausible response to the difficulty of how you would help the student. The rubric for assignment 3 is given also on page 52, and it guides you on, if you want the full marks for that assessment, what you need to do for part 1 and for part 2. Any questions before I move on to unit 4? I'm not seeing any hands up. Are we good? Can we continue? Thank you. All right, unit 4 will go fairly fast, quite fast. Hoping it does, because it's something that we've been talking about from unit 1, how to help and guide your students on writing a research proposal. Okay, and before I even tell you my entire process, like I said, I've got that work schedule, that work plan. Sorry, I was supposed to share it with you. I will upload it on Moodle. That is my work plan, my project plan with my students. But that takes you from your chapter 1 right up till the final dissertation or thesis, right? But at that proposal stage, what's the most important thing to start with? And it's something we did speak about. What do you guide your students on before they write the full proposal or even start drafting an introduction and problem statement? What's the first thing they need to have?
A concept?
Concept development, idea
Yes.
development. Okay.
Mm.
So your concept development, your idea development, and that forms your topic. That formulates into your topic. Because this is the idea, you have this concept, your idea. What else goes into it? You have this concept, but where did you get this concept from? Where do you think the students got that concept from? Remember, we spoke about problems, research gaps, gaps in literature, etc. Where do they get it from? Mainly.
I think from also interrogating literature, Prof.
You,
Rela-
yes, finding
relate,
gaps within that in
yes,
literature.
from the literature, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, with
More,
us, most of the concepts come from what they observe in
yes,
their workspace. Yeah, the questions they
yes.
have about how things are done and what would happen if maybe they were to change.
Also, problems, yes. In addition to that, Lindiwe, is they identify through observation problems that exist. For example, our industry being engineering, if you're looking at optimization of processes, we look at minimizing defects on a production line, for example. Now, a student can actually research something like that or investigate a study as to why is the defect rate so high, and that is the reason we need to reduce it. So the concept or area that they want to look at is reducing the defects in this company, for this production company. So it's generating these ideas, conceptualizing ideas, it's finding gaps, researching on gaps through literature, finding a problem that actually exists, because a lot of our students are employed and they conduct their studies within the organization that they're working in. So they always come in with a problem, and I formulated this topic because of this problem. That's how we work, right? So that's where we start guiding a student, because when a student comes to you and you're supervising them, do they have a full proposal already done? No, we have to still guide them. They have kind of a concept, something in writing with a topic, yes, but we still have to guide them on how to actually write this entire proposal. Then it's how they formulated the topic, how they formulating their introduction. Do we teach them how to write, the writing style? Do they know what style and tone to write in? We spoke about reading, but literacy is all about also about writing. Do we guide them on how to write? These novice researchers coming in doing research for the first time, do we guide them on how to write, the tone, the style, the type of reference style, technique you're supposed to use, Lindiwe?
I think yes. We do guide them, because at the beginning, with me, in my experience, you find that when you start working with a student, they write as they speak.
Yes.
So you have to adjust their writing and cone it into academic writing, teach them how scientific, what we expect in terms of the scientific writing. And then we channel it, we change it. That's why we have many drafts, because they start from the rough sketch and then they start improving.
Thank you so much for that. So yes, a lot of us write like how we speak, but then we know that when you are writing a dissertation, mini dissertation, a project, a research report, a thesis, there's a certain style and tone in which you have to write. Also, you can't write in the first person, you have to write in the third person. These are the things that we unpacking in this unit 4, in that how do you teach them to actually write up the proposal, tone, style, etc.? Do we also teach them how to reference? Because engineering, like I said, we either use IEEE or we use Harvard. Other disciplines will use a different style, but the most popular one is actually Harvard, right? I think Harvard and Chicago. So you've got to guide them, especially the novice ones need a lot of guidance. Devashri and then Lindiwe.
So, Prof, it's very easy when we speak about these things because we're exposed to it quite regularly in terms of
Yes,
the supervision that we do.
yes,
So we get it. And then you do take time and you do communicate these things to students, but somehow it kind of flies over their head as
yeah,
they too eager to get on with this and complete it, right?
yes.
So I completely agree with my previous colleague. Is I say, okay, we've now discussed the topic, we have it, you know what to do. Please go and write me a draft. And only when I get it and go through it quite thoroughly, am I able to understand the students' writing deficiencies
And their
and that
thought process, because what they're trying to put
thought
down on
processes and
paper.
point it
Yeah,
out to them.
yes.
So once they actually get to see it through what they've done, I believe that that becomes the most impactful thing. And once we start working from there and they're able to get that feedback to know, then I see things changing a bit. But before that first draft is actually out there, um, everything just goes apparently over the head. That's my experience. So I always feel that once I have something I can work with, I can actually demonstrate to them, this is where you at, this is where I need you to be, kind of process. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lindiwe.
In my experience, in terms of the referencing, as you've mentioned, Harvard and what, because if you just mention Harvard, then it tends to be too broad for the student. Then you need to mention that Harvard for Vids might be different because of mainly the punctuation within the referencing. So they need to be careful of how they punctuate, where you put the comma, where in terms of the year of publication and stuff. And usually with my students, when they start writing, I just give them that Smith document, that UJ Harvard referencing, and it usually
Yes.
makes it easy going forward.
No, definitely. Even with that, guiding them on the referencing style, how to reference, it's not a easy task, unless you're sitting with them and showing them. But it means you have to teach your students a lot of the work. 4.2 goes on to what we already spoke about, is putting in your identity, your voice as a researcher into the work that you are doing. Funny enough, I had a consultation today with one of my master's students, and all she did was just narrate directly from, but paraphrasing obviously, from just other works, right? So, not really stating her claim, making a statement, and then supporting it with what these other authors said. It was just author upon author and a lot of references, and that is how she wrote, not argumentative, not getting her voice across as to what she wanted to do. And this is supported and concurred or agreed upon by other authors, right? So I had to take her through that. And she was a master's student, and I didn't realize that. And as much as I said it in the previous lectures, that master students, some of them are completely novice, because you must know some of them also working, older generation coming back after like 25 years, 30 years to come and study. They don't have that background. They're actually sitting at novice at that stage. They're not in the middle of the honors and the PhD. So you have to teach them from scratch. So the voice we're talking about is your identity, your scholarly identity, and how you make it work for you when you are actually writing up your entire proposal. Okay, so your voice of what you want. And one of the things is the development of your topic and the development of the problem statement, which is very, very important, because problem statement must always have more of your voice in it. It has to be argumentative writing, and it must also reflect evidence, supported evidence from what other authors have said. Okay, any questions up until this point before I move on to 4.3? I'm just trying to find a document where I want to show you this. Okay, tell me if you can see it. It's what I take my students through, right? Even the master students go through this. It's a step-by-step guide that I actually take my students through. Okay. Um, it's helped me, and it's helped the students. Like I said, students like to be spoon-fed, especially this generation, and they love to have things that are set out for them, proper structures that they have to follow. So in line with having that argumentative writing, okay, and drafting the actual problem statement, which is a standard section in a proposal, okay? And this is identifying the problem and the steps you need to follow. So I broke it down for them, okay? Each step, what needs to be done. So this is, and I actually have a group session with the masters and PhDs and go through this. And with the honors students, it's a class on its own. Problem statement, introduction, and topic, problem statement, and then introduction, right? Which takes us to 4.3, right? So a lot of, like I said, your identity comes from the scholarly identity. I just want to show you developing the topic, which is 4.3. How do your students actually develop a topic? And what I've found works. Give me a moment. I had so many documents open to show you all examples of how I basically try to help the students break down their research. I put a lot of structures and stuff in place. Why am I not finding the one for the topic? I'm going to share everything that I have. You can benchmark against it's not cast in stone. Different learners, different supervisors do things differently. I'm just showing you. I've written everything and it's made it so much easier for the students. Why am I not finding? Sorry, I just want to see. Okay. Also, we spoke about the problem statement, showing them how to write. Now, this is all just your proposal writing, taking them, even your master's and PhD students, through this. Okay. Uh, how you present your topic, because a lot of students don't know how to write, coming into proposal writing, don't know how to present their work in terms of the introduction and what needs to be done. So this is a lot of stuff that I've developed on my own, and just put in, like, step by step, this is what you need to do, components of writing research, identifying gaps, problems, etc. Yeah, just a step by step guide. And then the entire proposal, what goes into it, I gave them like a structure, just to make it easier for them. This is how I'm just showing you how I guide my students. There was one, I'm not sure why I can't find it now. There was one on how to develop a topic which speaks to your 4.3, developing a topic. Okay, I found it now. So with the one on developing the topic, we're looking at, why is this frozen? How did the students and your role as a supervisor assist your students in choosing and refining a topic? Student will come in with a specific topic, and then as you go along with the research, the topic that they started with is not the topic that gets approved for their final project or dissertation or thesis. It gets refined. It doesn't change completely, but we refine it. Okay. And one of the ways I do this, we do this as a department, is sorry, my screen doesn't want to move from just that content guide. Let me share again. Okay, so how do you select a topic? Step by step, what they need to do. So any student registering coming in, they already have a concept, and this is where selecting a topic, narrowing your topic, conceptualizing. So I'm basically spoon feeding them at that stage. Honors and master students, I don't really so much with the PhD students, because we know that they are a bit more advanced and experienced in research. So what I do is I spoon feed and I take them through every single aspect of that proposal. I even go as far as how to develop. I've got more documents, but I'm not teaching you guys how to do a proposal. I want to hear what you actually do when you guide your students. So, like those documents, I have separate documents for objective and aims and objectives and research questions. I have document on how to write a literature review. I have documents on how to write. So it's stuff that I've researched and I've developed, and I've written these ones also from own experience. So that's how I know where the gaps lie in research and how we supervise. So these are the things that it's also made it easier to teach this module as well, because touching on those personal experiences. So yeah, I'm already on 4.3, and I don't want to go too far. I was hoping that we'd finish it today, but my throat seems to be hurting. Um, Give me your experiences on how you guide your students. Do you give them structures like what I do? Do you give them templates? Do we just freeball the whole thing when we're guiding them? I know a lot of in our faculty that I am associated with that actually do just freestyle the whole thing, freeball the whole thing where you're guiding the students, but they're so experienced. And like I said, I'm not going to call myself experienced because um, I have some level of expertise and experience in supervision, but I'm learning a lot as we go along. Like we just said about the AI and so on, I'm learning a lot. But you've got people that are so seasoned and so experienced that they don't need to learn and teach and stuff from all these rubrics, and it comes naturally to them. Devashri?
Um, Prof, I'm supervised by a supervisor that expects me to work independently. And when I face a roadblock in terms of connecting different areas within my research or theoretically, then I contact my supervisor and he is able to lend his expertise to getting me to make the connections that I need to. But in terms of the rest of it, it's independent work. Also, I think this is beneficial because it stimulates me in developing my own style, my own way, navigating the journey. Um, and I think it's really, something that has just been on the next level for me, that I've been thrown into the deep end and I have to learn to swim,
Yeah.
whether I like it or not. That's the context. And initially I struggled quite a bit, and I thought, God, really, I bitched and moaned. Sorry, excuse the language. I really moaned about why this man is not there to hold my hand. And I'm the kind of supervisor who really follows structure. So I would do what you do. I would say to students, okay, this part, this is how you do it. Step one, step two, step three.
Yes.
You can add your own flair to it, but give them a lot of structure going through it.
Yes.
And sometimes it feels as if when I'm doing it, that the student is disconnected because it seems more like my research than theirs. And I just want to find out, what's the 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 middle ground here. Because you know, like I said, I see the benefits of letting the student um, find their own journey and voice and make this so meaningful for them, and
Yes.
it really does breed a sense of commitment to completing the research. On the other hand, while you constantly providing these rubrics and structures for them, and they disconnected because they expect you to do the thinking of how the process is actually unfolding. So is there a middle ground? Um, what's your thoughts about that?
Uh, I don't have a definitive answer on that. Like I said, for me, it's also learning every day on different supervision styles and so on. For I found uh, this has worked in that if you're not very if you're still at the novice stage, right? This is what needs to be done step by step. This is what you at your PhD stage. At PhD stage, I do the same with my students. I throw them in the deep end and it's like, now you need to swim, get your head above water, because I assume, and we also make this mistake in that as much as you want them to work on their own, much like yourself, you teaching yourself, so to speak, right? Um, but they get lost along the way. You still have to hold their hand, you still have to guide them. I found that using that approach for our discipline is not very easy, especially with the technical writing for engineers. It's a lot of labs and stuff that we do, experiments and processes. It's I don't have a definitive answer for that. I don't know where's the middle ground, because myself, I also tend to struggle with that. I try to use different supervision techniques and styles, and it's just what works for that student, because I can give one student a template, they will follow it precisely. You give the same template to another student, they'll do something else. So you've got to customize. I've customized a lot for different students, and as we mentioned before, we started grouping into similar similar, the students, their thought processes, how they actually work together, similar personalities. So that kind of also worked. But yeah, it's a learning curve for me as well. I wish I
Um,
had a proper.
just one more dilemma. Um, and this one is also quite a weird one, but from my experience, I find that um, the more I kind of work with developing these templates, these guides, and this may be particular to my institution. I think that's a disclaimer I must make, is
Yeah,
that I find a lot of my colleagues, like the students, share with each other, and when other supervisors are not doing what they're supposed to, then the students just share whatever I give, and then the students progress that way.
yeah,
Um, and I have tried to take a lot of these um, guidebooks that we've been developing on this module to the postgraduate office and say, what, let's mainstream it, let's have a workshop with it, let's send it to all the postgraduate students. But that hasn't happened. I'm not sure why, because I've structured everything to be particularly to my institution with policies. But I do find students sharing everything with everybody else and other supervisors just benefiting off it. And I think,
yes,
we also must be very careful um, about our own ethical practices. Demanding it of students is one thing, but in terms of us as supervisors, you're not just taking other people's work and benefiting off it, or say to the student, well, just follow what the other supervisor is given. I think that's something we must also be conscious and aware of, and use it to guide our own ethical practices. And I'm not saying that we, as supervisors, you shouldn't be using anybody, but at least get permission, collaborate, work, add value to it. And I don't see why there isn't a reason why you can't do that. But just taking other people's work and not doing your own, I think that's also something we must be aware of.
aware of. Yeah, no, definitely. Collaboration with each other is it's a given. Okay, we learn from others. We learn from each other. It's knowledge sharing. But like you said, if it's just taking it without even discussing it with you, but that's a whole other problem and dilemma that we're dealing with, you know. But sharing of it, like I said, I've got no issues with sharing content and stuff like that. It's just how I do things and how I've broken it down for my students. Okay, so with that being said, and thank you so much for that, Devashni. Um, Elements, as we know, the basic elements that go into a proposal. Okay, and we're guiding the student at every point from your introduction to the problem statement to the literature review objectives, research questions, methodology. Like I said, I even give them a structure for the methodology. Then you've got your research strategy, and then optional would be other sections such as your Gantt chart, etc., right? Your timelines. Um, Part of the research strategy also includes taking the student through um, the data analysis, how they would actually analyze the data when they collect it, because part of the methodology you put in all the tools and techniques you're going to use in order to collect the data, but then how is the research actually going to be analyzed? Okay, we put it in as it being data analysis. Okay, but what we forget also is a section that's called um, data management. Okay, which we just started doing recently, and part of the proposal is teaching the students, guiding the students on data management. Data management is basically from the time that you collect the information, you collect your data, how is it stored, safeguarded, and then how is it disposed of? And then also with the ethical clearance, we had to go through the whole POPIA form and stuff, which we had to take the student through, right? Because yes, we don't want personal information when we're conducting interviews or um, giving out questionnaires. We don't want all their biographical details, such as age, gender, ethnicity, race, all that, because people don't want to give out that information anymore. It's now become very sensitive information. So these are the things that you have to look at. Data management, what you're collecting, how you're collecting it, how you're storing it and safeguarding it. And then one of the things we taught the students or guided the students on, where I had a session with them just recently because they're collecting data, the honest students, is from the time you collect your data, okay, and if you're keeping it on a memory stick, you don't keep it on the memory stick, you put it on the UJ cloud in our in our case, and then you store it as per UJ policy. You store it for 5 years and then you dispose of it, get rid of it, right? So that is the whole data management process that we go through, aside from your collection and your analysis. So it's an important aspect that is missing from the proposal, that as supervisors we now need to guide. So we went through a training and now we train our students on the data management process. Okay, so when they go for ethical clearance, it's also part of that process. I want to touch briefly on guiding the proposal, drafting and crafting process. Okay, so when you get your students to start writing, Lindiwe and Devashri also mentioned this, start writing, get them to write some kind of draft of the proposal. Okay, now, how is your feedback based? Do you use a rubric? Do you put comments directly onto the document? But this is my practice. I put the track changes and I put comments on the document, right? Some people, some supervisors I know use rubrics, right? And they mark according to that or provide feedback according to that. So what are some of the ways in which you would provide feedback to your students on a first draft? It's not the final proposal, the first draft when they're starting off their research process. How do we provide feedback? How is feedback provided to the students? Also, do we inform the students on how long the feedback will take? Some of us may just delay the students. I was actually guilty of that a few times, where things happened beyond my control and my students obviously suffered from it, in that it delayed me giving them feedback on certain chapters and aspects that they needed from me. Okay, so we generally go on a 2 to 3 week turnaround time for feedback. So how do you, what is your method and what is your process? Give me your experiences as a supervisor or upcoming supervisor. How would you do it, or how do you do it at the moment? Providing feedback to your students. First
So,
draft of the proposal. Yes, Teboho?
so what I do, especially with the honors or master student, is to add comments in their document. Maybe do use track changes
Yeah.
and add some comments in the document. And for honor students, because sometimes when you give them comments, you ask them to do something, they don't do it the way you want it. So I'll also have a follow-up meeting with them
Yes.
as a group to make sure and allow them to present, like Deveshni said, in terms of the open AI, allowing them to present so that you can be able to gauge if this person really understands what they are doing.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
And you got to do that follow up. So,
Yes, yes.
yeah, that follow up is so important, because maybe whatever they're trying to write, and drafting, you still got to guide them. That is why it's a first draft, it's not a final, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I also do those track changes. Another question, before I go to Fundo, what I want you to think about as well is, what is a good time frame or turnaround time for feedback of these proposals? Fundo?
I just wanted to share how do I give the feedback to a
Yes, please
student,
do.
especially my honors, the students that I'm supervising. It is their first time to do their research, the research proposal and essay. So I don't give the feedback that was given to me, or I don't give the feedback the way it was facilitated to me, where there will be, you would feel being like, you feel that the feedback is not giving constructive information, and the feedback is somehow ambushing the student. The student will feel like I'm being ambushed by my supervisor. So I try by all means to give clear and specific feedback, and like I avoid such words like, "What does this mean?" The student already doesn't know what does that mean. So I don't use kind of question, because what does this mean? And you leave it like that. Then I use that. If I ask such questions, I try to balance my criticism with some encouraging words. For example, I would say, Lindiwe, you are doing well in this topic. However, for this topic to be aligned with the research objectives, so you need to focus on eliminating this information, and you include this information. And these are the relevant articles and sources that can assist you to formulate your comprehensive problem statement, or whatever that I'm giving to the to student. Then, and I look at their level as well, because we tend to pitch. Uh, that's what I've observed with so many supervisors and with so many scholars, that we tend to pitch and we supervise students based on our level, and we forget that these are the novice researchers. It is their first time, so it's imperative that they understand the basics, they understand the foundation. We lay a good foundation. Like, for example, supervising an honors student, you cannot be pitching at PhD level. So I need to come back to that level of an honors student, so that the student is able to comprehend the feedback, because I find it unnecessary for me to give vague feedback to a student, and the student won't be able to understand that feedback. So the feedback that I give, I ensure that that feedback it is going to not be like a monologue, a feedback to student. It should be a dialogue, because the student shouldn't just sit down with that feedback trying to find out what the supervisor was saying, or what the supervisor was trying to say. So I encourage that the student, after I gave them the feedback, they come back to me to question and to seek more clarity, so that there is that dialogue, conversation that is taking place in my supervision. So I've been giving that feedback in that way. And I look at the time frame. I always tell my student that please give me at least 2 weeks of time to give you the feedback. I don't want to, I don't stay long time. And like, for example, my supervisor used to give me feedback after a month. So by that time, the feedback, yeah, it's still necessary, it's still important to a student, but I don't wait too long to give the feedback, because by that time it could be that student will be less interested in continuing with the study. So while the student is still interested, there is that enthusiasm to that particular student to conduct a study. So I give the feedback so that the student is being encouraged to go and read and submit other draft to me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Um, Yeah, I think also time frame is very important. Giving them the feedback is very important. Also helping them, like you said, with additional information. So if they're struggling to get peer-reviewed articles, if they're struggling to get information to put into their proposal, what can you do additionally to help your students? Okay. How much of additional material do you actually give them? Because you, being an expert in your specific discipline, should know the type of, like we mentioned previous units, the type of databases and journals and so on, and conferences, proceedings that the student, you can actually guide them or navigate them to go and read those specific ones and finding stuff that's related to their topic. Lindiwe?
Okay, I just wanted to input on the discussion when Mfundo now mentioned timely feedback. I used to
Yes.
be very particular about that. When the message comes in, I make sure that within 3 days or within that week, I give the feedback. But I
Mm.
promise you, and I'm sure you would also agree, Prof, that the more you advance in academia, the way you work also changes. You know, your work
Yes.
ethic, you try to give feedback timely, but things come. It's a lot. It's
You
a lot.
can't,
Not
exactly.
that,
Yeah.
yes, not that you now I understand. I think in previous sessions, I also used to feel like the previous modules, I also shared my experience with my supervisors. Yeah, they take time. They used to take time to give feedback. Sometimes, though the feedback will come back detailed and the relationship was, but the feedback, it just took its time. And I was wondering, but I'm managing. I'm here. I'm in academia. I'm managing now. Why couldn't they? Now I know. Like things happen. You would have a to-do list, but you do not get to that
You don't
main
get to
thing.
finish that
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Then in terms of what you would do when maybe all else fails, like in the instant where I'm mentioning, you just don't have time. There are many, like in UJ, for example, as I'm part of the UJ staff, I'm not sure in other universities, we have a wonderful library staff. So with me, I've made my life easy. I make sure that I look out for those short webinars, anything that comes from the library, I send the student. I know that it also cuts part of my work, but it also makes sure that my students are supported. So you can
Yes.
share a lot of things, links, webinars, stuff. You
Yes.
don't always have to have a one-on-one and on Teams. You need to find a way to make your work easy. You can't always be there for students. They are postgraduates. You
Yes.
know, in Fundo's case, it's different because it's mostly undergraduates, and I can see that he's
Yes.
passionate in grooming them to becoming. And of course, when they get to master's level, those students will be much sharper than other students that were
Mm.
left alone or were left to fend for themselves as if they were master's students.
Yes.
But you just need to find ways to make it easy for you whilst um not maybe being the cause of your students struggling during the process.
Yes.
There are many ways. You just need to be sharp. You need to be aware of things that will assist your student. But the higher you go, it's not that easy to manage your time and the to-do list to just tick, 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 tick. I've done
Yeah.
everything for Monday. Monday things might still be on the list even the next
Yes.
week, you know? Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I agree completely with that. It's like I said when I started this, I have difficult time. I'll have pages and pages of to-do lists, and yes, there'll be things that I'm still carrying over from Monday or even from last week that I just couldn't get. And like I mentioned, over just the past 2 years, I've got 43 students, right? And this is just postgraduate students. I've still got an honors class of 82 students for project. And I'm also teaching and I'm publishing and as a associate professor, as you keep going up, you guys will come to that point where you'll see that your workload increases a lot and you need to do a lot more research. But you got to find that balance. And you, as a supervisor specifically, the consultation time, the 15 minutes, 30 minutes doesn't work. You need a solid hour or so with the student if you're doing a one-on-one consultation. And yes, Lindy, UJ has a lot of resources available for the students. I use them as well. I even bring them from the library into my class to do these short webinars and so on. I also, as soon as I see the links and the circulars coming, I send it to all the students. Please attend. Make sure you avail yourselves. Go and attend. It's additional learning, you know. So these are the resources that the students need to tap into. And us as supervisors, this is where the guidance comes from, in that we have to show them this is what's available and give them as much of the resources available. Help them with as much as, from the databases to the librarians that can help you, to these webinars on training tools, on Atlas TI, on EndNote, on using SPSS, on how to write literature, how to use Scopus AI, how to get from Google Scholar, multitude of resources. So yeah, I think there's a lot of what we can impart onto our students as supervisors to make it a conducive journey for them throughout this entire research journey. But work does come in, a lot of things that we are balancing, even meetings, committees that we have to serve on, and also it takes our time away from the masters and the PhD students. Devashri, did you want to say something before I move on to 4.4?
No, Prof. Sorry about that.
No problem. All right. So 4.4 now. You've taken the student, we've formulated the topic, we've written the introduction, problem statement, objective, literature, everything that goes into the proposal. We've reviewed the first draft. We now have a final draft. They've done all these corrections after we've done the feedback and stuff. Now we're on 4.4, which is they need to defend the proposal. I'm not so sure if all your departments or institutions actually do this, but at UJ, there is a defense of the proposal. Okay, I think most institutions practice this. Um, so once the final proposal is approved by the supervisor and by the faculty committee, research committee, FRC, then the student has to defend. So there's a panel that the student defends in front of. Are our students guided by their supervisor on how to present? Because not all of them know how to do presentations. Do we even guide them on what goes into the presentation, showing them that these are the templates they need to follow? Because for UJ, for those of you that know UJ processes, we have templates, and even the PowerPoint templates, we have Word templates and so on. PowerPoint, even when we're presenting at conferences, we have to use the UJ logo, the UJ templates, right? And now with the UJ 20-year celebration, it's a 20-year celebration template, right? Um, and then next year we'll revert back to the original ones. But now are we guiding our students on step by step how to present, what goes into the presentation? Don't waffle in terms of, I noticed students are not guided properly in that they explain a lot on literature. We don't really, when you're defending the proposal, specific things that as a supervisor you need to guide your students on, that oral presentation. And also from the oral presentation to the written work, you can also pick up whether it's the student's own work, right? Because of how they present or what they're presenting. Introduction is important. Well, your title, your topic, introduction is important. Problem statement, objectives, and research questions, very important, right? A bit of the scope of the study, because we obviously want to know the boundaries in which you are keeping the research, or how narrow or how broad it is. Brief, when we say brief literature review, and students, when they're doing their PowerPoints, we must also guide them on how to do their PowerPoints, because they put a whole lot of writing. So it's like full sentences, full paragraphs. Have you all seen that? And they're just reading from there. It's their work, it's their research. They should know it and not just read off the slide. So things like that. It also teaches them how to present. So in the future, when they have to do presentations, whether it's for their qualification or whether it's even at work, they have to do these presentations. They're better equipped and better guided on how to speak, put more visual representation on the slides, because even if you do it as a poster slide where you have pictures and you just talk to the pictures and so on, it's more visually appealing than just going through. You lose the audience's attention, okay? And then they don't really focus on what you're trying to do, which is actually defend the proposal. So, how do we guide our students on this oral defense of the proposal? Mfundo first and then Devashri.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think the first thing that I take it from you is that it is imperative that we use a standardized template that is going to help students to know what is anticipated from their presentation when they are defending their proposal. I take it that one, and I'm going to implement it in my department because in my department, I've been sitting in quite number of defense proposals, especially for master's student. Then I've noticed that number of students are using any template that they're comfortable with. And as you indicated that majority of students tend to adhere and invest a lot of time in the literature review. And I've witnessed that for the past 2 years when I was sitting in the committee of defense for proposal. Then a student will provide lengthy paragraphs, and some of the paragraphs are not even well referenced, and it could be copy. You can even say that if this is a copy and paste because they simply know that it won't be submitted on Turnitin or elsewhere. Then it does not show where the student have engaged or have read about the work that they are conducting. So I've actually noticed that, I've observed that several times when students are doing a presentation, and students are I've seen that when it comes to methodology, because I think that's the crucial part that the committee wants to know how the study will be conducted, where the data will be collected, how the data will be
Absolutely.
collected, who is
Yes.
involved in terms of ethical consideration. How are you
Yes.
going to get your ethics approval? And what affiliation do you have with the people that you want to interview, or where the data will be collecting? Because what we observe, students conduct studies, and when it comes to data collection and they don't get accessibility to conduct interviews with that particular organizations that they've listed as the case study of data collection. So those are the challenges that we have seen when it comes to a student when they are defending their proposal. And they tend to keep on repeating countless times the topic. And yeah, that's all that I can say about what I've observed. Thank you.
Yes. It's a common trend. It's a common trend, and the reason why we're unpacking it in 4.4 is because these are the things that come up. I sit in those panels, I sit in those committees, and they focus on, and then you have a time frame in which to finish that oral presentation, right? And aside from the written presentation of the actual proposal, which we guide them on, and obviously I use structures and I give the students that, but when they're presenting, you can see that they haven't been guided because they'll spend so much time reading off this literature, and even the way they present those PowerPoints, it's like I said, just narratives, sentence upon sentence, paragraph upon paragraph. It becomes difficult and you lose your audience. And then we forget what questions we're going to ask because we haven't really paid attention to what the student was presenting. Devashri and then Lindiwe.
Um, yeah, Prof. I think, you've both the previous colleague and yourself have touched on it, is that the presentation is where you get to see a lot of the deficits, you know.
Yes.
And the way I overcome that is I always have a group session with my students and get them to present to their peers and myself. And I think more practice gets them to be more confident, but we're also able to identify those areas, those problematic areas. And you know, students being students, what would they do? They would just you know, a very skim over everything because they're not confident enough to speak about and don't have enough experience to speak about the nitty-gritties of how they're going to do things. So, you know, even with those presentations, it's so important to get students to show the applications, to show, to go beyond just, for example, talking about ethics, they would say they would get informed consent or they would get the gatekeeper's letter, and that's ethics, you know.
Yeah.
But they don't really go into the confidentiality or the trustworthiness or, you know, the
The ethical
credibility and
principles that
validity
go
of
with
their
it.
studies.
Yes.
So you're going to have to guide them to unpack beyond the surface level, and really respond in terms of the application of what they're choosing. Like if they're justifying their theory, why is it meaningful to the study? How will it be used in the study as a conceptual framework, as a theoretical framework? So I think those things happen with a lot of practice and giving the students an opportunity to present that, giving them feedback through those presentations, but also doing it with their colleagues, and then taking it to the formal presentations does help, I found. Thanks, Prof.
No, most definitely. We also do the group one with their peers because they also get constructive criticism and feedback from their peers as well. So it's not only from the panel, and then they can improve before they actually go in front of the panel because panel will probably ask similar questions. Lilindiwe?
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to speak, Prof. For me, with me, I've sat in most of these presentations, and I think I will agree with what Mfundo has mentioned in terms of being aware of the methodology that you apply as a student, because they catch them there. They will ask them questions. How did you make the decision to decide maybe to choose or select a phenomenological study? Because most
Yeah.
of our research is qualitative.
Mm.
Okay, so they will ask them questions like that because you need to warn your students. I think your question was based on how do you prepare these students. You need to be familiar with, or maybe be aware of the questions that will ask. They will ask you about your methodology. Why did you choose this
Yes.
specific methodology? Do you think it matches? And with us, sometimes the question that most pops up is if you are asking a contentious question. Because if you are asking a question that people are not comfortable responding to, you are not going to get participants. So, how
Mm.
are you going to make means of getting these participants? Do you have a plan? Because it means then it's a study that is not going to happen.
Yeah.
So students need to be warned as well. You need to look at the topic. Is the question well placed? In terms of literature, sometimes students, and you mentioned something about literature, where I think it was the type of where your student was giving a grocery list. I think some of
Yeah.
reviewers will say it's a grocery list
Yes.
because it's just a list of literature. Yes, it's literature that's relevant, but
Yes.
there's no coherence, there's no logic how you are
Mm.
marrying these conversations together. So you need to warn your student about that, because in our
Yes.
DRC, the Departmental Research Committee, we usually probe students regarding their methodology and the literature they've used. Do you think this is relevant? Because you just noticed that if maybe you allocate same as me, I'm a DRC chairperson, and I've noticed that most people do pick up on the grocery list pattern. People just use a lot of literature. Literature, yes, it's nice, but you don't see how everything ties in. They catch the students there and they are unable to answer the question. So you need to let them, or to warn them, they need to be aware of the literature that they pick up. Why am I picking up this literature? What is important in this particular writing that I like and that links to my study, so that they are able to respond to the questions?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
So it's the students definitely, especially with presentation styles, they need to be guided, and they don't know how to do this. Some of them, like you said, very fresh in their understanding, and need to be taught how to do presentations. Because I mean, as they go along, like I said, my students do the defense of the proposals. We even do a defense of the progress, which is just before or just as they're doing their data collection, and then we have the defense of your final dissertation or thesis or project, So, yeah, and if they don't grasp it, and if they don't show the relevant information that needs to go into that presentation, also how they present, how they speak. One of the things that also came out is, um, as much as it's about tone, how they speak, but somebody also mentioned, when a student is presenting, they must be presentable, if you understand what I'm saying. A lot of students come in and it's daily wear, which is fine, acceptable. But if you were in a working situation and you're preparing the students for presenting in front of your work colleagues and so on, how would you dress? How would you present yourself? So also the way they dress, I was told the way they dress and the way they carry themselves also gives them that confidence in when they are presenting. So it kind of, I think, linked. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but yeah, you can give me your thoughts on that. Lindiwe?
I think maybe colleagues, in terms of reasoning, because it also will reflect on how the student considered how this is relevant to their own study, because the committees tend to catch the student on that this was the weakness. I think, yes, she used this, maybe she just maybe was guided by the supervisor, and sometimes you find that the supervisor was myself as the chairperson. They need to
Yeah.
use things that are related to their study, that are relevant to their study, and that they can defend, because this is a defense. So
Yes.
they need to have a strong reasoning and statements that are aligned to how they decided. Why did you decide to use a qualitative study? Why did you decide to
Yes.
take a quantitative route? Because it depends. It also depends on why one would choose a qualitative or a quantitative study. Depends on how much research was done on that study,
Yes.
because you don't just decide because you like this type of research
Yeah.
technique. So if your proposal or your student's proposal presents the study in a way, you have a lot of research, and then you just out of the blue decided, I am going to go about this quantitatively, then they're going to question you. Isn't there a lot of research?
Already
I'm
being done.
familiar with this.
Yes.
Yes, I'm familiar with
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. I'm familiar with 1, 2, 3. I think that this study will be qualitative. So you as a supervisor need to be aware and need to be, I think maybe just to take us a little bit back, a few steps back, you need to be, when you take up a topic, need to know how much work has been done. Am I comfortable with
Absolutely.
this topic? Because if you're not comfortable, then you are going to mislead this student. During the defense, they are going to be lost, and you are not going to be able to assist.
Yeah.
Because in our DRC, we don't allow the supervisors to make any comments, maybe afterwards when the student has left the room.
Yes.
But most of the time, they need to defend themselves, so you need to prepare them.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And the deductive reasoning is very important. It's something that I forgot to touch on, and I'm glad that you brought it up, and that it shows their thought process. That is why I said it's so important, because it's your voice as a researcher, as a student, and it needs to come out. So it can't be the voice of the supervisor because my supervisor told me to use this method or do this method, but how is it being done? Also look at what previous literature, which is very important when it comes to your topic, because you can't have something that is obsolete and that has been researched so much that what are you now adding that's going to be new? What are you adding that's of value, that's original, that's different from what's already been done? You know, we want to add on to the existing body of knowledge, but what new are you bringing to the table to add to that existing knowledge? And that's when studies become obsolete, and that it's done too much. Like in my area, specializing in quality engineering, total quality management, TQM, if you're familiar with it, there's been hundreds and thousands of papers being written globally on TQM. What value are we adding now if we're doing research on TQM? So it's a lot of things to unpack and a lot of things to think about. I'm going to stop it there at 4.4, and then we will continue on Saturday when I see you guys, because I think we've just got Saturday and next week Thursday. So in terms of time, I think we're doing very well. Are there any parting comments or questions? And then we can close the session. Anyone? Parting words? All right. Thank you so much for giving me your time this evening. Okay. And I will see you on Saturday. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.